Sarah Chen woke up at 5 in the morning like she had done every day since she was 8 years old. The old wooden floors of her family's farmhouse creaked under her feet as she walked to the kitchen. Outside, the Oregon sky was still dark, but she could hear her father already moving around in the barn. Her mother was making coffee in the kitchen. The smell filled the small room and mixed with the scent of fresh bread from the night before. Sarah's mother smiled at her daughter and handed her a warm cup. "Morning, sweetheart," her mother said. "Dad needs help with the new irrigation system today." Sarah nodded and drank her coffee. She was home from Stanford University for summer break, 3 months away from her studies in computer science and engineering, 3 months back to the life she had always known. The Chen family had owned this farm for over 40 years. Sarah's grandparents had bought the land when they first came to America from Taiwan. They grew organic vegetables and sold them at local markets. It was hard work, but it was honest work. Sarah put on her old work boots and walked outside. The morning air was cool and fresh. She could see the mountains in the distance, still covered with a thin layer of mist. This place was beautiful, but it was also challenging. Her father was standing near the tomato fields, looking at a broken water pipe. He was a quiet man who spoke more with his hands than his words. When he saw Sarah coming, he pointed to the pipe and shook his head. "This system is too old," he said. "We lose too much water. Too much money." Sarah knelt down and looked at the pipe. Water was leaking from several places. The whole irrigation system was at least 20 years old. It wasted water and cost too much to run. "Dad, what if we could make this better?" Sarah asked. "What if we could use computers to control the water flow?" Her father laughed, but not in a mean way. "Computers don't understand farming, Sarah. Farming needs human hands and human eyes." But Sarah was already thinking. At Stanford, she was learning about artificial intelligence and smart systems. She was learning how computers could solve real problems. Why not farming problems? During her first year at college, Sarah had felt out of place. Most of her classmates came from rich families in big cities. They wore expensive clothes and talked about things she had never heard of. They went to private schools and had tutors and took expensive trips during school breaks. Sarah wore simple clothes from discount stores. She worked in the university cafeteria to pay for her food. While other students went to parties, she studied in the library until it closed. She was there on a full scholarship because her grades were perfect, but she often felt like she did not belong. Her roommate was a girl named Ashley from New York City. Ashley's father was a lawyer and her mother was a doctor. Ashley had never seen a farm before she met Sarah. "Do you really milk cows?" Ashley had asked during their first week. "We don't have cows," Sarah explained. "We grow vegetables." "Oh," Ashley said, looking confused. "Like in the dirt?" Sarah realized that Ashley had probably never thought about where her food came from. To Ashley, vegetables came from the grocery store. The idea that someone had to plant them, water them, and pick them by hand was strange. But Sarah was not embarrassed about her background. She was proud of it. She knew how to work hard. She knew how to solve problems with limited resources. She knew the value of everything because her family had to be careful with money. These skills helped her at Stanford. While other students struggled with difficult projects, Sarah found creative solutions. When professors gave impossible deadlines, Sarah managed her time perfectly. When classmates gave up on hard problems, Sarah kept working until she found the answer. By her second year, her professors began to notice her talent. Dr. Rodriguez, her artificial intelligence teacher, asked Sarah to help with his research project. Soon Sarah was spending extra hours in the computer lab, learning about machine learning and data analysis. "You have a special gift," Dr. Rodriguez told her one day. "You see problems differently than other students. You think about real applications, not just theory." Sarah knew where this different thinking came from. It came from growing up on a farm where every problem needed a practical solution. It came from watching her parents work hard every day to make their small business survive. During her third year, Sarah started thinking seriously about how technology could help farmers. She researched irrigation systems, crop monitoring, and weather prediction. She learned about sensors that could measure soil moisture and computer programs that could analyze plant health. One evening, while video calling her parents from her dorm room, Sarah watched her father looking tired and worried. "The weather has been unpredictable," he told her. "Too much rain last week, not enough this week. We lost some of the lettuce crop." Sarah felt frustrated. Weather prediction technology existed. Soil monitoring systems existed. Smart irrigation existed. But these technologies were too expensive for small farmers like her parents. They were designed for huge agricultural companies, not for family farms. That night, Sarah made a decision. She would create technology that small farmers could afford. She would build systems that were simple to use and easy to maintain. She would use her computer science knowledge to help people like her parents. She started working on her first prototype during winter break. In her parents' garage, she built a simple sensor system that could measure soil moisture and send the data to a smartphone app. Her father was skeptical at first, but he let her test it on a small section of the farm. The system worked better than expected. It helped them save water and grow healthier plants. Her father began to see that maybe computers could understand farming after all. Word spread to other farmers in the area. Soon neighbors were asking Sarah to build similar systems for their farms. She realized she was onto something important. Now, as she stood in the morning sun looking at the broken irrigation pipe, Sarah felt more determined than ever. She was going to graduate from Stanford in 1 year. After that, she was going to start her own company. She was going to create technology that would help small farmers around the world. Her father handed her a wrench, and together, they began fixing the old pipe. But Sarah was already designing a better system in her mind. A system that would change everything. 10 years had passed since Sarah Chen graduated from Stanford University. She was now 28 years old and visiting her hometown for the first time in 2 years. The small Oregon town had changed in many ways, but it still felt like home to her. Sarah parked her rental car outside her parents' farmhouse. It was the same modest car she always rented when she came home. Nothing fancy or expensive. She preferred to keep things simple during her visits. Her parents rushed out to greet her. Her father looked older now, with more gray hair and deeper lines around his eyes. Her mother seemed smaller somehow, but her smile was just as warm as always. "Sarah, you look too thin," her mother said, hugging her tightly. "Are you eating enough in California?" Sarah laughed. Her mother always worried about her eating habits. "I'm fine, Mom, just busy with work." They spent the afternoon catching up and walking around the farm. Her parents had made some improvements over the years, including a new greenhouse and better equipment for the organic vegetables they grew. "Business is good," her father told her. "Your sensor system helped us a lot. Other farmers in the area are using similar technology now." Sarah felt proud hearing this. The simple moisture sensors she had built in college had been just the beginning of something much bigger. The next morning, Sarah decided to explore the town. Main Street looked different now. Several new businesses had opened, including a coffee shop called Mountain View Café. The building used to be an old hardware store, but now it had large windows, modern furniture, and a sign advertising artisan coffee and pastries. Sarah was curious about this new addition to her hometown. She was wearing her usual clothes, simple blue jeans, a red flannel shirt, and worn sneakers. Her long black hair was tied back in a ponytail, and she carried a small backpack instead of a purse. The cafe was busy when she walked in. Several tables were full of people she did not recognize. They looked like they might be tourists or new residents. Everyone seemed well-dressed and spoke in quiet, sophisticated voices. Sarah approached the counter where a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair was working. The woman wore a black apron over an expensive-looking dress. Her name tag said Jessica. "Good morning," Sarah said politely. "Could I have a medium coffee, please?" "Just black." Jessica looked up from the espresso machine and studied Sarah from head to toe. Her expression changed from professional politeness to something colder. "Excuse me?" Jessica said, as if she had not heard the order. "A medium coffee. Black," Sarah repeated, thinking maybe the espresso machine had been too loud. Jessica glanced around the cafe, then looked back at Sarah with obvious disapproval. She took in Sarah's simple clothes, her work boots, and her rural accent. "I'm sorry," Jessica said slowly, "but this establishment caters to a certain clientele." Sarah felt confused. "I just want to buy coffee." "Perhaps you would be more comfortable at the diner down the street," Jessica continued, her voice getting louder. "This is a premium coffee house. Our prices might be outside your budget." The conversations at nearby tables began to quiet down. Other customers turned to watch what was happening. Sarah felt her cheeks getting warm with embarrassment. "What are you saying exactly?" Sarah asked, trying to stay calm. Jessica sighed as if she was dealing with a difficult child. "Look, I'm trying to be nice here. This isn't really the place for Farm workers. We serve imported coffee beans and artisan pastries. Everything here is quite expensive. A man at a corner table laughed quietly and whispered something to his companion. A woman near the window shook her head and looked away, as if she was embarrassed for Sarah. Sarah stood there for a moment trying to process what was happening. She had traveled all over the world for business meetings. She had presented her ideas to important executives and government officials. She had been treated with respect everywhere she went. But here, in her own hometown, she was being judged by her appearance. "I can afford your coffee," Sarah said quietly. Jessica rolled her eyes. "Listen, honey, I'm sure you work very hard, but this really isn't the right place for you. The diner has great coffee too, and it's much more affordable." An older man near the door spoke up. "Just serve the girl her coffee, Jessica. What's the big deal?" But Jessica ignored him. "Sir, you don't understand. We have a certain atmosphere to maintain here. Our regular customers expect a certain environment." Sarah felt hurt and angry, but she also felt something else. Determination. She had faced prejudice before, but usually it was more subtle. This was direct and cruel. "I see," Sarah said calmly. "You're refusing to serve me because of how I look." "I'm not refusing anything," Jessica said defensively. "I'm simply suggesting that you might be happier somewhere more suitable." More customers were staring now. Some looked uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. Others seemed to agree with Jessica's assessment. A young couple at a table near the counter whispered to each other. The woman said, "She does look a bit out of place here." Her boyfriend nodded. "Yeah, this is supposed to be an upscale cafe." Sarah heard these comments and felt her heart sinking. These people did not know anything about her, but they had already decided she did not belong. She thought about her parents working hard on their farm every day. She thought about all the farmers she knew who grew the food that probably ended up on the tables of these same people who were judging her. "You know what?" Sarah said, looking directly at Jessica. "You're right. I am more comfortable with honest, hard-working people." She turned and walked toward the door. Behind her, she heard Jessica say to another customer, "I'm sorry about that. Some people just don't understand appropriate social boundaries." As Sarah reached the door, the older man who had spoken up earlier approached her. "Miss, I'm sorry about that," he said quietly. "That wasn't right." Sarah managed a small smile. "Thank you. At least someone here has good manners." She walked outside and stood on the sidewalk for a moment. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from anger and disappointment. She had left this town 10 years ago as a proud farm girl with big dreams. She was returning as a successful businesswoman, but nobody could see past her simple clothes and rural background. Sarah walked slowly back to her car. She passed the old diner that Jessica had mentioned. Through the windows, she could see farmers and shop workers enjoying their breakfast. People in work clothes and casual outfits. People who looked like her, but she did not go inside. Instead, she sat in her car and thought about what had just happened. She thought about all the times people had underestimated her because of where she came from or how she looked. Usually, she did not care about other people's opinions. She was confident in who she was and what she had accomplished. But today felt different. Today the judgment had been so direct and public that it stung in a way she had not expected. Sarah started her car and drove back to the farm. She needed to think about how to respond to this situation. She needed to decide if she was going to let this incident pass or if she was going to do something about it. As she drove past the fields where she had grown up, Sarah made a decision. Tomorrow she would return to that cafe, but things would be very different. What Jessica and the other people in the cafe did not know was that Sarah Chen was not just a farmer's daughter visiting home. She was the founder and CEO of Agritech Solutions, one of the most successful agricultural technology companies in the world. After graduating from Stanford 10 years ago, Sarah had started her company in a small garage in Silicon Valley. She had used her savings from summer jobs and a small loan from her parents to buy the first computer equipment and sensors she needed. Her first product was an improved version of the soil monitoring system she had built for her parents' farm. But Sarah did not stop there. She spent months visiting small farms across California, Oregon, and Washington. She talked to farmers about their biggest problems and challenges. "Water management is killing us," one farmer told her. "I never know if I'm using too much or too little." "Pest control is so expensive," said another. "By the time I see the damage, it's too late." Weather prediction is always wrong for our specific area, complained a third farmer. The forecasts are for the big cities, not for our valley. Sarah listened to all these concerns and began developing solutions. She created smart irrigation systems that could adjust water flow based on weather forecasts and soil conditions. She designed sensors that could detect early signs of plant disease or pest damage. She built weather monitoring stations that provided hyperlocal forecasts for individual farms. But the most important thing Sarah did was make sure her technology was affordable and easy to use. She remembered how her father had been skeptical about computers helping with farming. She knew that complicated, expensive systems would not help the people who needed them most. Her first year in business was difficult. Sarah worked 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. She wrote computer code, built hardware, tested products, and visited customers. She lived in a tiny apartment and ate cheap food to save money for her business. Slowly, word began to spread about agri-tech solutions. Farmers started calling Sarah directly, asking for her help with specific problems. Agricultural magazines wrote articles about her innovative approach to farm technology. By her second year, Sarah had hired 3 employees. By her third year, she had moved to a larger office and had 15 people working for her. Her products were being used on over 200 farms across the western United States. The breakthrough came in her fourth year when Sarah developed an artificial intelligence system that could analyze satellite images and drone photographs to predict crop yields and identify problems before they became serious. This technology was revolutionary because it could help farmers make better decisions about planting, harvesting, and selling their crops. Large agricultural companies began to notice Sarah's work. They offered to buy her company for millions of dollars. But Sarah refused. She wanted to keep control of her technology to make sure it continued to help small farmers, not just big corporations. Instead, Sarah found investors who shared her vision. She raised $50 million to expand her company while keeping majority ownership. With this money, she hired the best engineers and scientists she could find. She opened research facilities in 3 different states. Agri-tech solutions began developing even more advanced technologies. They created autonomous drones that could plant seeds and spray crops with precision. They built AI systems that could predict disease outbreaks weeks before they happened. They designed robot harvesters that could pick delicate fruits without damaging them. But Sarah never forgot her original mission, helping small farmers compete with large corporations. She made sure that every product her company created had a version that small farms could afford. She offered training programs and technical support in multiple languages. She partnered with agricultural colleges to teach farmers how to use modern technology. The international expansion began in her 6th year. Farmers in developing countries faced many of the same challenges as small farmers in America, but with even fewer resources. Sarah's team adapted their technologies for different climates, crops, and economic conditions. They worked with rice farmers in Vietnam, coffee growers in Colombia, and vegetable producers in Kenya. Each project taught them something new about how technology could help solve agricultural problems around the world. The recognition came gradually at first, then all at once. Agricultural journals named Sarah one of the most influential people in modern farming. Technology magazines called her a visionary entrepreneur. The United Nations invited her to speak about sustainable agriculture. Sarah won awards for innovation, leadership, and social impact. She was invited to the White House to discuss agricultural policy. Universities offered her honorary degrees. Investment firms valued her company at over $1 billion. But the biggest validation came from the farmers themselves. Sarah received hundreds of letters and emails from people whose lives had been changed by her technology. A farmer in Iowa wrote that her drought management system had saved his farm during the worst dry season in 20 years. A family in Guatemala reported that her pest detection sensors had increased their crop yields by 40%. These success stories motivated Sarah to keep pushing forward. She invested heavily in research and development, always looking for new ways to help farmers work more efficiently and sustainably. Last year, Sarah had faced the biggest decision of her career. A major technology corporation had offered to buy 70% of agri-tech solutions for $2.8 billion. The offer would make Sarah incredibly wealthy, while allowing her to keep control of the company's direction. After months of negotiations, Sarah had accepted the deal. She remained as CEO and kept 30% ownership of the company. The partnership gave her access to global distribution networks and unlimited resources for research and development. The money from the sale had made Sarah one of the wealthiest self-made women in America. But she continued to live modestly and focus on her work. She bought a comfortable house in Silicon Valley, but nothing extravagant. She purchased some nice clothes for business meetings, but she still preferred her simple farm clothes when she was not working. Sarah had also bought a private jet for business travel. Agritech Solutions now had projects on every continent, and Sarah needed to visit customers and partners around the world. The jet saved her time and allowed her to work during long flights. But when Sarah visited her hometown, she always drove a rental car and stayed in her childhood bedroom. She never talked about her wealth or success with her parents' neighbors. She wanted to remain connected to her roots and remember where she came from. This morning, sitting in her car after the humiliating experience at the cafe, Sarah thought about all she had accomplished. She had built a company that employed over 3,000 people. Her technology was helping millions of farmers grow food more efficiently and sustainably. She had proven that innovation could come from anywhere, even from a small farm in Oregon. Yet Jessica, the barista, had looked at her and seen only a poor farm worker who did not belong in an upscale cafe. The other customers had agreed with that assessment based on nothing more than her clothes and accent. Sarah realized that this was exactly the kind of prejudice that held people back. How many brilliant ideas were ignored because they came from people who looked different or came from humble backgrounds? How many talented individuals were discouraged from pursuing their dreams because others judged them by their appearance? She thought about her parents who had worked hard their entire lives to build something valuable. She thought about all the farmers she knew who were intelligent, innovative, and resourceful, but were often dismissed as simple or backward by people who had never done their jobs. Sarah made a decision. Tomorrow she would return to Mountain View Café, but this time, she would make sure that Jessica and everyone else understood the lesson about judging people by their appearance. She reached for her phone and called her assistant in California. It was time to arrange for her private jet to make a trip to Oregon. That evening, Sarah sat on the front porch of her parents' farmhouse, watching the sunset paint the Oregon mountains in shades of orange and pink. Her mother brought her a cup of tea and sat down beside her in the old wooden rocking chair. "You seem quiet tonight, sweetheart," her mother said. "Is everything okay?" Sarah had not told her parents about what happened at the cafe. She did not want to worry them or make them feel bad about their hometown. But she was still thinking about Jessica's words and the way the other customers had looked at her. "Mom, do you ever feel like people treat you differently because we're farmers?" Sarah asked. Her mother was quiet for a moment, rocking slowly in her chair. "Sometimes," she said finally. "When your father and I go to the bank or to meetings in town, some people assume we don't understand business or technology. They talk to us like we're children. Doesn't that make you angry?" "It used to," her mother replied. "But then I realized that their opinions don't change who we are or what we've accomplished. We've built a good life, raised a wonderful daughter, and helped feed our community. What strangers think about us doesn't matter." Sarah nodded, but she was not sure she agreed completely. Sometimes what strangers thought did matter, especially when it affected how they treated you or whether they gave you opportunities. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed Marcus Rivera, her business partner and best friend from Stanford. Marcus was the Chief Technology Officer of Agritech Solutions and one of the few people who knew everything about Sarah's life. "Hey, Marcus," Sarah answered. "Sarah, how's the vacation going? Are you relaxing and eating your mom's amazing cooking?" Despite her mood, Sarah smiled. Marcus had visited the farm several times over the years and loved her mother's homemade meals. "It's going fine," Sarah said. "Just spending time with family." But Marcus knew her too well. "You don't sound fine." "What's wrong?" Sarah hesitated, then decided to tell him about the cafe incident. She described Jessica's attitude, the other customers' reactions, and how embarrassed and angry she had felt. When she finished, there was silence on the other end of the phone. "Marcus, are you there?" "I'm here," Marcus said, and Sarah could hear the anger in his voice. "I can't believe someone treated you like that. In your own hometown, no less." "It's not a big deal," Sarah said, though she did not really believe it. "Sarah, it is a big deal. You've been hiding your success for too long. You think you're being humble, but really you're allowing people to make unfair judgments about your worth." Sarah had heard this argument from Marcus before. He thought she should be more open about her achievements and wealth. He drove an expensive car and lived in a big house, and he was proud of what he had accomplished. "I don't want to show off," Sarah said. "That's not who I am." "This isn't about showing off," Marcus replied. "This is about challenging people's prejudices. That barista and those customers need to learn that you can't judge someone's value by their clothes or accent." Sarah sipped her tea and thought about what Marcus was saying. Maybe he was right. Maybe by always dressing simply and keeping her success quiet, she was missing opportunities to educate people about their assumptions. "You know what you should do?" Marcus continued. "You should go back to that cafe tomorrow, but this time arrive in style. Show them exactly who they were disrespecting." "I don't know," Sarah said. "That seems petty." "It's not petty, it's educational. Sometimes people need a dramatic lesson to understand their mistakes. Besides, you earned the right to travel however you want. You've worked harder than anyone I know." After they hung up, Sarah continued sitting on the porch as darkness fell around her. She could hear her father working in the barn, probably checking on the new irrigation system they had installed that afternoon. She thought about her journey from this small farm to Silicon Valley and international success. She remembered all the times people had underestimated her because of her background. Usually she had proven them wrong through hard work and patience. But sometimes a more direct approach was necessary. Sarah also thought about the message her response would send. If she returned to the cafe in her regular clothes and simply ordered coffee, Jessica might serve her reluctantly, but she would not learn anything. The other customers would not understand that their assumptions had been wrong. But if Sarah returned in a way that clearly demonstrated her success, it could start important conversations about prejudice and assumptions. It could help people think twice before judging others based on appearance. There was another factor to consider. Sarah's story could inspire other people who had faced similar discrimination. How many young people from rural areas or working-class families had been discouraged by the way others treated them? How many had given up on their dreams because someone convinced them they did not belong in certain places? Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found her pilot's number. Captain Jennifer Walsh had been flying Sarah's private jet for 3 years. She was a former military pilot who was professional, discreet, and always available on short notice. "Hi, Captain Walsh," Sarah said when the call connected. "I need to make an unexpected trip tomorrow." "Of course, Miss Chen, where are we heading?" "Actually, I need you to bring the jet here to Oregon, to the regional airport near my parents' farm." There was a pause. Captain Walsh had never picked up Sarah in Oregon before. Usually, Sarah flew commercial when visiting her family and only used the private jet for business trips. "Certainly," Captain Walsh said. "What time would you like me to arrive?" "Mid-morning around 10 o'clock. And I'll need ground transportation arranged as well. Something nice but not too flashy. I'll arrange everything. Should I file a flight plan back to California?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Not yet. I'm not sure how long this will take." After making the arrangements, Sarah went inside to find her parents. They were in the living room, her father reading farming magazines and her mother working on a crossword puzzle. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something," Sarah said, sitting down across from them. She explained about her business success, though they already knew some of it. She told them about the sale of her company and her current wealth, which surprised them. Finally, she described what had happened at the cafe and her plan to return the next day. Her parents listened without interrupting. When she finished, her father shook his head. "Sarah, you don't need to prove anything to those people," he said. "I'm not doing it to prove anything to them," Sarah replied. "I'm doing it to teach them something important, and maybe to help other people who face the same kind of treatment." Her mother reached over and took Sarah's hand. "Your father and I are proud of you no matter what you wear or how you travel. But if you think this will help people learn to treat others better, then we support you." That night, Sarah lay in her childhood bed, looking up at the ceiling she had stared at thousands of times as a girl. Back then, she had dreamed of changing the world through technology. She had imagined helping farmers and solving important problems. She had accomplished those dreams, but she realized that changing technology was only part of the solution. Changing attitudes and assumptions was just as important. Tomorrow, she would return to Mountain View Café, but this time, Jessica and the other customers would see a different side of the farmer's daughter they had dismissed so easily. Sarah fell asleep planning exactly how she would handle the situation. She wanted to make her point clearly, but she also wanted to do it with grace and dignity. The goal was not to humiliate anyone but to open minds and start conversations. By morning, she would be ready to teach her hometown an important lesson about judging people by their appearance. The morning air was crisp and clear when Sarah heard the distant sound of jet engines approaching. She was standing in her parents' kitchen, wearing a tailored navy blue business suit that she had brought from California. Her hair was styled professionally, and she carried a leather briefcase instead of her usual backpack. Her mother looked at her with a mixture of pride and concern. "You look beautiful, sweetheart. But are you sure about this?" "I'm sure, Mom," Sarah said, adjusting her jacket. Sometimes people need to see the truth to understand their mistakes. The sound of the jet grew louder as it approached the small regional airport just outside town. Sarah had used this airport only once before, years ago, when a business emergency had required her to fly directly home. Today would be different. Her father came in from the barn, still wearing his work clothes. He looked at his daughter and shook his head with a small smile. "You clean up pretty nice," he said. "But remember, clothes don't make the person. You were just as valuable yesterday in your farm clothes as you are today in that fancy suit." "I know. Dad, that's exactly the point I want to make." Captain Walsh had texted Sarah that the Gulfstream G650 had landed safely and was parked at the small terminal. The ground transportation she had requested was waiting, a black Tesla Model S with a professional driver. Sarah hugged her parents goodbye and walked outside to where the Tesla was waiting. The driver, a well-dressed woman in her 40s, opened the door for her. "Good morning, Ms. Chen. I'm Linda, and I'll be your driver today. Thank you." "Linda, we're going to Mountain View Café on Main Street." As they drove through town, Sarah noticed people stopping to look at the sleek black car. The small Oregon town did not see many luxury vehicles, especially ones driving slowly down Main Street. When they pulled up in front of the cafe, several people on the sidewalk turned to stare. Sarah could see through the large windows that the cafe was busy with the morning crowd. "Should I wait here, Ms. Chen?" Linda asked. "Yes, please. This shouldn't take too long." Sarah stepped out of the Tesla and immediately noticed the effect her arrival had on the people nearby. A man walking his dog stopped and stared. Two women coming out of the bookstore next door whispered to each other and pointed. Word was already spreading through the small town about the mysterious private jet that had landed at the airport. People were curious about who the important visitor might be. Now they could see an elegantly dressed businesswoman stepping out of an expensive car. Sarah walked toward the cafe entrance, her heels clicking on the sidewalk. Through the window she could see Jessica working behind the counter. Some of the same customers from yesterday were sitting at their usual tables. When Sarah opened the door, the conversations in the cafe gradually died down. People turned to look at the well-dressed stranger who had just entered. Jessica looked up from the espresso machine and smiled professionally. "Good morning. Welcome to Mountain View Café. How can I help you today?" Sarah approached the counter calmly. She could feel all eyes in the cafe watching her. Some customers were clearly impressed by her appearance and expensive clothes. Others seemed curious about who she might be. "I'd like a medium coffee black, please," Sarah said politely. "Of course," Jessica said enthusiastically. "Coming right up. Are you visiting our lovely town?" Sarah noticed the complete change in Jessica's attitude compared to yesterday. The barista was friendly, attentive, and eager to please. The only difference was how Sarah looked. "Actually, I grew up here," Sarah said. "My family has a farm just outside town." Jessica paused while preparing the coffee. She studied Sarah's face more carefully as if trying to remember something. "A farm?" Jessica said, looking confused. "Really?" "Yes, really. In fact, I was here yesterday morning." Now Jessica stopped what she was doing entirely. Her face went pale as recognition began to dawn. "Yesterday?" Jessica whispered. The other customers were listening to every word now. The man who had defended Sarah yesterday was sitting at his usual corner table. He was watching the scene with great interest. "That's right," Sarah continued calmly. "I came in wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. I asked for the same coffee I'm ordering now." Jessica's mouth opened, but no words came out. She stared at Sarah as the full realization hit her. "You refused to serve me," Sarah said, her voice still calm and polite. "You said this establishment catered to a certain clientele. You suggested I would be more comfortable at the diner down the street." The cafe had become completely silent. Every customer was staring at the drama unfolding at the counter. Some looked confused, others embarrassed, and a few seemed to be putting the pieces together. Jessica finally found her voice. I mean, Let me help you understand what happened, Sarah said. Yesterday you judged me based on my clothes and decided I didn't belong here. Today you're treating me completely differently because I'm wearing an expensive suit and arrived in a nice car. She paused and looked around the cafe at all the watching faces. But I'm exactly the same person both days. A woman at a table near the window gasped softly. She was one of the customers who had agreed with Jessica's treatment of Sarah yesterday. The only thing that changed, Sarah continued, is your perception of me. Yesterday you saw someone you thought was poor and unworthy of your service. Today you see someone you think is wealthy and important. Jessica was now visibly shaking. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I didn't know. You didn't know what? Sarah asked. That I could afford your coffee? That I had every right to be here? Or that your assumptions about people based on their appearance might be wrong? The older man who had spoken up for Sarah yesterday stood up from his table and began to applaud slowly. One by one, other customers joined him until most of the cafe was clapping. Sarah raised her hand to quiet the applause. This isn't about me getting an apology, she said. This is about all of us learning something important. She turned back to Jessica, who was crying now. I'm not angry with you, Sarah said gently. I understand that you made assumptions based on what you thought you knew. But those assumptions were wrong and they hurt people. Sarah reached into her briefcase and pulled out her phone. She showed Jessica a photo of herself in work clothes, standing next to a group of farmers in front of a large agricultural facility. I'm Sarah Chen, CEO of Agritech Solutions. My company creates technology that helps farmers around the world. I grew up on a farm here in this town, and I'm proud of my background. She swiped to another photo showing her speaking at a United Nations conference about sustainable agriculture. I've spoken to world leaders about farming policy. I've won international awards for innovation. Last year, I sold part of my company for almost $3 billion. The cafe erupted in whispers and gasps. People were pulling out their phones, probably looking up Agritech Solutions in Sarah's name. But you know what? Sarah continued. None of that matters as much as the fact that I'm a human being who deserved to be treated with basic respect yesterday. Just like every person who walks through that door deserves respect regardless of how they look or where they come from. Jessica was sobbing now. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say. Sarah's expression softened. Say that you'll remember this lesson. Say that you'll treat the next person who comes in here wearing work clothes with the same courtesy you showed me today. The entire cafe was listening intently. Sarah realized this was her opportunity to make the larger point she had come to make. Sarah looked around the silent cafe, making eye contact with each person who had witnessed yesterday's humiliation and today's revelation. She could see a mixture of emotions on their faces: embarrassment, curiosity, shame, and understanding. May I have that coffee now? Sarah asked Jessica gently. Jessica quickly finished preparing the coffee with shaking hands. Of course. And please, there's no charge. I'm so incredibly sorry about yesterday. I'll pay for my coffee, Sarah said firmly but kindly. I don't want special treatment because of who I am or what I own. I just want the same courtesy that every customer deserves. As Jessica processed the payment, Sarah turned to address the entire cafe. She had everyone's attention, and she wanted to use this moment wisely. I'd like to share something with all of you, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the small space. This situation isn't really about me. It's about how we see and treat each other in our community. She gestured toward the windows that looked out onto Main Street. This town raised me. The farmers, shop owners, and working families here taught me the values that made my success possible. Hard work, honesty, and treating everyone with respect. An elderly woman at a table near the door nodded and said, I remember you, dear. You're Jim and Lily Chen's daughter. Your parents are wonderful people. Thank you, Sarah smiled. Yes, they are. And they taught me that a person's worth isn't measured by their bank account or the clothes they wear. Sarah pulled out her phone again and showed the screen to the people closest to her. This is a photo from last month. I was visiting a coffee farm in Guatemala, working with farmers to implement new irrigation technology. The image showed Sarah in simple work clothes, her hands dirty, standing alongside farmers in a muddy field. She was smiling broadly, clearly happy to be doing hands-on work. I was wearing clothes very similar to what I wore here yesterday, Sarah continued. But those farmers treated me with respect and kindness because they judged me by my actions and character, Not my appearance. She swiped to another photo showing her presenting to a room full of executives in expensive suits. This is from a board meeting in New York last week. Same person, different clothes, different setting, but the real me is the same in both pictures. Jessica had stopped crying but was listening intently to every word. Ms. Chen, I grew up in the city and I guess I brought some prejudices with me when I moved here. I thought rural areas were backward. I thought people who worked on farms weren't as sophisticated or educated. That's exactly the problem, Sarah said. You assumed that someone who looked like a farm worker couldn't possibly be educated or successful. But some of the smartest, most innovative people I know work in agriculture. She showed another photo on her phone, this one of her father examining a complex piece of farming equipment. This is my dad. He may not have a college degree, but he understands soil chemistry, weather patterns, plant biology, and machinery in ways that would amaze you. He's been solving complex problems every day for 40 years. The older man who had defended Sarah yesterday stood up. I'm Bill Harrison. I've lived in this town my whole life, and I've watched this kind of prejudice hurt good people before. Young folks leave because they think they're not smart enough or sophisticated enough for the outside world. Exactly, Sarah agreed. And that's a loss for everyone. This town has produced teachers, doctors, engineers, and entrepreneurs. But if we keep telling young people that their background makes them less valuable, we'll lose more talent. A woman in her 30s raised her hand tentatively. Ms. Chen, I work at the bank and I'm embarrassed to admit that I sometimes make assumptions about farmers when they come in for loans. After hearing this, I realize I need to examine my own biases. Sarah nodded approvingly. That's the first step toward change. Recognizing our unconscious prejudices and working to overcome them. She took a sip of her coffee and continued. I want to tell you about some of the most impressive people I've met in my career. There's Maria, a coffee farmer in Colombia who has a PhD in botany and speaks 4 languages. There's David, a wheat farmer in Kansas who designed and built his own GPS-guided planting system. There's Priya, a rice farmer in India who developed a new irrigation method that's now being used across Asia. The cafe patrons were listening with rapt attention. Sarah could see that her words were making an impact. These people might not look like what you expect successful innovators to look like, Sarah continued. They wear work clothes and have dirt under their fingernails. But they're solving some of the world's most important problems. How to feed a growing population while protecting the environment. Jessica wiped her eyes with a tissue. I never thought about it that way. I guess I had this narrow idea of what success looks like. We all do, Sarah said. I've been guilty of it too. When I first moved to Silicon Valley, I assumed that people in expensive suits knew more than people in casual clothes. I had to learn that intelligence and creativity come in all forms. She showed one more photo on her phone, a group picture of her company's research team. The image showed people of various ages, ethnicities, and dress styles all smiling in a laboratory setting. This is my research and development team, Sarah explained. We have former farmers, urban college graduates, immigrants from 6 different countries, and everything in between. The diversity of backgrounds and perspectives makes us stronger and more innovative. A young man who had been quietly listening from a corner table spoke up. Ms. Chen, I'm a recent college graduate and I've been thinking about leaving town because I didn't think there were opportunities here for someone with my education. What did you study? Sarah asked. Computer science and environmental engineering. Sarah's eyes lit up. Those are exactly the skills we need to solve agricultural challenges. Have you ever considered how technology could help local farmers? Or how your environmental knowledge could improve sustainability practices? The young man looked thoughtful. I never considered that farming could be high-tech. Modern agriculture is incredibly sophisticated, Sarah explained. We use satellites, drones, artificial intelligence, robotics, and advanced chemistry. There are amazing opportunities to use cutting-edge technology to help feed the world sustainably. She looked around the cafe again. That's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about changing perceptions. If talented young people think agriculture is old-fashioned or boring, they'll never discover the exciting possibilities in this field. The woman who had worked at the bank spoke again. Ms. Chen, what can we do to be better? How can we avoid making these same mistakes? Sarah thought for a moment before answering. Start by questioning your assumptions. When you meet someone new, try to learn about them as an individual rather than making judgments based on their appearance or background. Ask questions instead of making assumptions. She gestured toward Jessica. And when you do make mistakes, and we all will, Apologize sincerely and learn from the experience. Jessica, your apology today was genuine and I can see that you understand what went wrong. Jessica nodded emphatically. I will never judge someone like that again. I promise. Good, Sarah said. But more importantly, I hope you'll help educate others when you see them making similar mistakes. The elderly woman who had recognized Sarah's parents spoke up again. Dear, your parents must be so proud of what you've accomplished. They are, Sarah smiled. But you know what they're most proud of? The fact that success hasn't changed who I am at heart. I'm still the same girl who grew up helping in their fields and learning the value of hard work. Sarah finished her coffee and prepared to leave. I want to thank all of you for listening and for being open to this conversation. Change starts with awareness, and awareness starts with honest dialogue. As she walked toward the door, the entire cafe burst into genuine applause. This time Sarah accepted it with a gracious smile. As Sarah reached for the cafe door, Jessica called out to her. Ms. Chen, please wait. I need to say something else. Sarah turned back to face the young woman who had treated her so poorly just one day before. Jessica walked around the counter, her face still red from crying, but her expression determined. I want everyone here to know that what I did yesterday was completely wrong. I judged Ms. Chen based on her clothes and her accent, and I refused to serve her because I thought she didn't belong here. The cafe was silent again as Jessica continued. I moved here from Portland 6 months ago, and I brought all my city prejudices with me. I thought rural people were somehow less educated or sophisticated than city people. I was completely wrong, and I'm ashamed of my behavior. An older gentleman in overalls who had just entered the cafe looked confused. What's going on here? Bill Harrison, the man who had defended Sarah yesterday, stood up to explain. Tom, this is Sarah Chen. She's Jim and Lily's daughter, and she's the CEO of a big technology company. Yesterday, Jessica here refused to serve her because she was wearing farm clothes. Tom looked shocked. Refused to serve Jim's daughter? That's terrible. The Chen family has been part of this community for decades. Sarah stepped forward. Mr. Tom, the important thing isn't who my parents are or what company I run. The important thing is that every person who walks through that door deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their background or appearance. Tom nodded vigorously. You're absolutely right, young lady. I've been coming to this town for 70 years, and we've always prided ourselves on treating everyone fairly. Jessica looked at Tom with tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Mr. Tom. I let my prejudices cloud my judgment. I promise it will never happen again. The young college graduate who had spoken earlier stood up. Ms. Chen, can I ask you something? How did you deal with discrimination when you were starting your company? Sarah considered the question carefully. It wasn't easy. There were many times when people underestimated me because I was young, or because I was a woman, or because I came from a farming background. But I learned that the best response to prejudice is excellence. She paused, looking around the room. I worked twice as hard as anyone else to prove my worth. I let my results speak for themselves. And most importantly, I never let other people's limited thinking limit my own dreams. A middle-aged woman near the window raised her hand. But isn't it exhausting to constantly have to prove yourself? Yes, it is, Sarah admitted. That's why change is so important. No one should have to work extra hard just to overcome people's prejudices. We need to create a world where everyone gets judged by their character and abilities, not by superficial characteristics. Bill Harrison nodded. Sarah's right. I've seen too many talented young people leave this town because they felt like they weren't valued here. We need to do better. Jessica wiped her face with her apron. Ms. Chen, is there anything I can do to make up for what I did? Sarah thought for a moment. Actually, yes. Use this experience to help educate others. When you see someone being judged unfairly, speak up. Share this story so other people can learn from your mistake. She looked around the cafe at all the listening faces, and that goes for everyone here. We all have unconscious biases. The key is to recognize them and work to overcome them. The woman from the bank spoke up again. Ms. Chen, would you be willing to speak to our Chamber of Commerce? I think the whole business community could benefit from hearing your perspective. I'd be happy to, Sarah replied. But I want to make something clear. This isn't about me being special because I'm successful. This is about treating everyone with dignity and respect, whether they're the CEO of a company or someone looking for their first job. Tom, the older gentleman approached Sarah. Young lady, I want to apologize on behalf of our whole town. This isn't how we raised our children to behave. Mr. Tom, you don't need to apologize for other people's actions, Sarah said kindly. Besides, I think most people in this town are good people who would never intentionally hurt someone. Sometimes we just need reminders to check our assumptions. The young college graduate approached Sarah hesitantly. Miss Chen, I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm really interested in learning more about agricultural technology. Would it be possible to visit your company, or maybe have a conversation about opportunities in that field? Sarah smiled warmly. Of course. Here's my business card. Send me an email and we'll set up a time to talk. I'm always looking for talented young people who want to help solve agricultural challenges. The young man's face lit up with excitement. Thank you so much. I never imagined there could be such interesting technology work in agriculture. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need to change, Sarah said. Agriculture is one of the most technology-intensive industries in the world now. We're using everything from satellite imagery to genetic engineering to help farmers be more productive and sustainable. Jessica had been listening to this conversation with growing interest. Ms. Chen, I studied business in college before I took this job. I've been thinking that maybe I could do more with my education than just work in coffee shops. What interests you about business? Sarah asked. I've always been fascinated by how companies grow and how they solve problems for their customers. I guess I just never thought about agriculture as a business opportunity. Sarah handed Jessica a business card as well. Agriculture is definitely a business, and it's a growing one. The world population is increasing, and we need innovative solutions to feed everyone sustainably. There are opportunities in technology, finance, marketing, logistics, and many other areas. The elderly woman who had recognized Sarah's parents spoke up. You know, dear, your success story gives me hope for our young people. It shows that you don't have to leave your values behind to succeed in the world. That's very important to me, Sarah replied. I never wanted to become someone different just to fit in with wealthy or powerful people. The values my parents taught me, hard work, honesty, caring for others, those are what made my success possible. Bill Harrison stood up again. Sarah, I want to ask you something. What can we as a community do to better support our young people and help them see the opportunities that exist right here? Sarah considered this thoughtful question. I think the most important thing is to show young people that success comes in many forms. Not everyone needs to move to a big city or work for a famous company to make a meaningful contribution to the world. She gestured toward the windows overlooking Main Street. This town has everything needed to support innovation and entrepreneurship. You have hardworking people, natural resources, and real problems that need solving. What you need is to help young people see the possibilities. The woman from the bank leaned forward. What kind of possibilities? Well, for example, sustainable farming practices, renewable energy, ecotourism, online businesses that can operate from anywhere, food processing and distribution, educational services. The list is endless, Sarah explained. The college graduate was taking notes on his phone. I never thought about how many business opportunities might exist in a small town. Small towns have advantages that big cities don't, Sarah continued. Lower costs, stronger community connections, less competition, and often less regulation. Plus, you can have a bigger impact in a smaller community. Jessica had been listening intently. Ms. Chen, do you think someone like me could start a business here? I mean, after what I did yesterday, I'm not sure people would trust me. Sarah looked at Jessica with compassion. Jessica, you made a mistake, but you've also shown that you can learn from it and grow. People respect honesty and the willingness to change. If you're serious about starting a business, this experience could actually make you a better entrepreneur because you'll understand the importance of treating all customers fairly. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with people asking questions about business, technology, and opportunities. Sarah answered each question thoughtfully, clearly enjoying the chance to inspire and educate her hometown community. Finally, Sarah looked at her watch. I should probably get going, but I want to say one more thing. Today has been much more positive than I expected. Instead of just teaching a lesson about prejudice, we've had a real conversation about opportunity and community. That's the kind of dialogue that creates positive change. As she prepared to leave again, the entire cafe burst into applause one more time. But this time it felt different. It was applause not just for Sarah's success, but for the important conversation they had all shared. 3 months later, Sarah was sitting in her office in Silicon Valley when she received an unexpected email. The subject line read, Mountain View Café, update from Jessica. Sarah opened the email with curiosity. Jessica had written a long message describing how much her life had changed since that morning in the cafe. She had started volunteering with local high school students, helping them explore college and career opportunities. She had also enrolled in online business courses and was developing a plan to start her own company focused on promoting rural tourism. But the most surprising news was at the end of the email. Jessica had organized something called Respect Week at the cafe, where local farmers, teachers, shop owners, and other community members were invited to share their stories and expertise. The event had been so successful that the town council decided to make it an annual tradition. I wanted to thank you again for teaching me such an important lesson, Jessica wrote. Your grace and patience that day changed not just how I think, but how our whole community thinks about respect and opportunity. Sarah smiled as she read the email. She had hoped that her dramatic return to the cafe would make an impact, but she had not expected it to create such lasting change. Her assistant knocked on her office door. Sarah, you have a visitor. A young man named David Martinez from Oregon. Sarah looked up, confused for a moment, then remembered. David was the college graduate from the cafe who had been interested in agricultural technology. David entered her office looking nervous but excited. He was wearing a neat button-down shirt and carrying a folder full of papers. Ms. Chen, thank you so much for agreeing to see me. I've been working on some ideas since we met, and I wanted to share them with you. For the next hour, David presented his research on sustainable farming practices that could be implemented in small communities. His ideas were innovative and practical, showing a deep understanding of both technology and rural economics. David, this is impressive work, Sarah said when he finished. Have you considered starting your own company to implement these ideas? David's eyes widened. I never thought I could do something like that. I assumed I'd need to work for someone else first to gain experience. Experience is valuable, Sarah agreed, but sometimes the best way to learn is by doing. And your community connection gives you advantages that outsiders wouldn't have. Sarah spent another hour mentoring David, sharing advice about business planning, funding options, and building a team. By the time he left, David had a clear roadmap for starting his agricultural consulting company. 2 weeks after David's visit, Sarah received a phone call from Bill Harrison, the man who had defended her at the cafe. I hope you don't mind me calling, Bill said. I got your number from your parents. I wanted to tell you about something exciting that's happening here. Bill explained that David had indeed started his consulting company and was already working with 5 local farms to implement sustainable practices. The success of his work had attracted attention from other communities in Oregon. But that's not all, Bill continued. Jessica has started a small business incubator in the space above the cafe. She's helping 3 other young people develop their business ideas, and the bank has created a special loan program for local entrepreneurs. Sarah was amazed. That's wonderful news, Bill. It sounds like the whole community is embracing change. It is, Bill replied. But we wanted to ask you something. Would you consider being the keynote speaker for our first annual Rural Innovation Conference? We're planning it for next spring, and we want to celebrate all the entrepreneurship that's happening here. Sarah immediately agreed. The idea of returning to celebrate positive change instead of confronting prejudice appealed to her greatly. 6 months later, Sarah stood on a stage in the high school gymnasium of her hometown, looking out at an audience of over 300 people. Farmers, students, business owners, and entrepreneurs from across the region had come to attend the Rural Innovation Conference. She had changed her usual approach for this speech. Instead of wearing a business suit, she wore nice jeans, a blue flannel shirt, and boots. Clothes that represented her true self rather than corporate expectations. A year ago, I was refused service at a cafe in this town because someone judged me by my appearance, Sarah began. Today I'm standing here celebrating a community that has chosen to embrace innovation and opportunity for everyone. The audience applauded enthusiastically. In the front row, Sarah could see Jessica, David, Bill Harrison, and many other faces from that memorable morning at the cafe. The lesson we learned that day wasn't really about me, Sarah continued. It was about the importance of seeing potential in everyone and creating opportunities for people to succeed, regardless of their background. She gestured toward David, who was sitting with several other young entrepreneurs. David Martinez left college thinking he might have to leave this community to find opportunity. Instead, he stayed and created his own opportunities. His sustainable farming consulting company now works with farmers across 3 states. The audience turned to applaud David, who blushed but smiled proudly. Jessica Thompson could have been defined by her mistake, Sarah continued. Instead, she chose to learn from it and become an agent of positive change. Her business incubator has helped launch 6 new companies in the past year. More applause filled the gymnasium. Jessica waved from her seat, her face glowing with pride and happiness. Sarah spent the next 30 minutes sharing stories of innovation happening in rural communities across America. She talked about farmers using artificial intelligence, small towns becoming centers for renewable energy, and young people choosing to stay in their hometowns to build the future. The old model said that talented people had to leave small towns to find success, Sarah said. The new model says that talented people can create success wherever they are, especially when their communities support and believe in them. During the question and answer session, a high school student raised her hand. Ms. Chen, I'm planning to study engineering in college, but my parents think I should move to a big city afterward. What advice do you have? Sarah thought carefully before answering. My advice is to keep your options open. Learn everything you can, gain experience wherever opportunities exist, but remember that you can always bring that knowledge back to your community. Some of the most satisfying work I've ever done has been helping rural communities implement new technologies. After the conference, Sarah visited the cafe one more time. The walls were now covered with photos of local entrepreneurs and their businesses. A bulletin board displayed job openings and investment opportunities in the area. Jessica greeted her with a huge smile. The usual? Medium coffee, black? Actually, Sarah said, I'd like to try one of those artisan lattes you're so famous for. As Jessica prepared the drink, she shook her head with amazement. A year ago, I thought I was too good for this place. Now I realize this place was too good for my attitude. We all grow and change, Sarah replied. The important thing is that you chose to grow in a positive direction. That evening, Sarah sat on her parents' porch once again, watching the sun set over the Oregon mountains. Her father joined her carrying 2 cups of her mother's tea. I'm proud of you, daughter, he said simply. Thanks, Dad. I'm proud of our community too. Look how much positive change has happened in just 1 year. Her father nodded slowly. You know, when you came home that day upset about the cafe, I thought you should just ignore it and move on. I'm glad you chose to do something more constructive. Sometimes ignoring problems doesn't make them go away, Sarah said. Sometimes you have to confront them directly, but in a way that creates understanding instead of just anger. As Sarah prepared to fly back to California the next morning, she reflected on everything that had happened since that painful morning at the cafe. What had started as an incident of prejudice and discrimination had become a catalyst for positive change throughout the community. The Hidden Potential Foundation, which Sarah had established after her cafe experience, was now providing scholarships to rural students across the country. David's consulting company was expanding into neighboring states. Jessica's business incubator had been featured in a national magazine as a model for rural entrepreneurship. Most importantly, the story of what happened at Mountain View Café had spread far beyond the small Oregon town. Sarah had shared it in speeches around the world, and it had become a powerful example of how communities could overcome prejudice and embrace opportunity. Years later, when people asked Sarah about her greatest business achievement, she would often surprise them. Instead of talking about her technology company or her financial success, she would tell them about a small cafe in Oregon where a moment of discrimination became a catalyst for community transformation. That's when I learned that the most important innovations aren't always technological, she would say. Sometimes the most important innovation is changing how people see and treat each other. The story of the farmer's daughter who was rejected at a cafe and returned in a private jet became more than just a tale of personal triumph. It became a reminder that everyone deserves respect, that assumptions based on appearance are often wrong,